Now, Power Rangers has always done holiday episodes where they're much more lighthearted and or more forgiving in the type of story they do. Like, for example, Alpha will come out in the holiday episode because it makes perfect sense for him to be outside of the command center. So it gives you more of an opening to more fun stories. Of course, there's still going to be limitations where, you can't go too far or it just makes the characters look stupid, like certain plots in Ninja Steel's Halloween episodes that just don't make any sense and they were forced in order to make a plot move forward. Now, a lot of the Halloween episodes are clip shows because they are ultimately made to save money, but that doesn't mean they're bad because I don't mind clip shows as long as they are relevant to the story in some capacity or they're just having a really fun time.
Life's a Masquerade.
Let's begin with Life's a Masquerade, the very first Halloween episode Power Rangers ever did. And for the plot of the episode, I really liked it because it was actually the beginning of Rita actually doing some sort of escalation to actually deal with the Rangers, because usually MMPR and a lot of the other PR seasons, they kind of fall into the slump of the villains become useless, the Rangers are always defeating them, they have dumb monsters, and they really can't get through anything else. And this was the beginning of the Super Putties, which are far better than what the Z Putties did. And also, on top of that, it's a combination of, Rita's taking, ideas from the Rangers dressing up in these weird costumes, so she creates the Frankenstein monster to go after the Rangers. And this is one of the few examples of the monster interacting with the Rangers as their civilian selves, because, MMPR, even though we love it, it still had a lot of issues behind the scenes. They could not afford to do a lot of things. They had to stick strictly to Japanese footage and just said, well, let's just use this monster, create a Halloween story around it, and because the story idea works within the show's budget, we could have the civilian Rangers interact with it, linking up both sides of the footage. And like I said, I did overall like that Rita was creating these Super Putties in order to fight the Rangers much more better, because if you can have putties that are as strong as the monsters, for example, then it's going to cause a lot of problems, and that's what gives them the upper hand. It finally broke out of the mold of the US footage being very restricted and they couldn't afford anything. Granted, the US costume versus the Japanese costume, they really don't match. I did really like this Halloween episode, even though it's very simplistic.
Party monsters.
Now, obviously, the newer Halloween episodes from Samurai On are mainly clip shows, but like I said, they don't have to be bad clip shows. And this was the one that I was kind of surprised at. Not only being from Samurai, which is really not a great season, but another reason why I was kind of surprised about this episode. And it always seems to pop up in the Halloween episodes where, how I've always complained that Power Rangers loves to censor in too many ways, where they always try to cover up death, kill, the words, the acts. But in this Samurai episode, they literally focus on these monsters that were killed by the Samurai Rangers and are complaining. In a way, it's kind of like that Almost Got Him episode from Batman the Animated Series. We're following the villains and seeing how they were defeated by Batman and then being all annoyed. It's the very same premise, and which is what kind of surprised me. I was like, oh yeah. We're looking at the monsters as, beings beyond, I'm just gonna fight the Rangers, die, and that's it, and there's really no personality beyond that. So they do that in this episode, but it's just always strange to me. It's like, so you finally acknowledge the monsters, they actually are people, they actually can have feelings, and even though they do wrong things, this still happens behind the scenes. But then on top of it, like, it's okay that they're dead, and we're talking about how they got blown up and stuff. It's just like, it's very strange when Power Rangers acknowledges the stuff they want to try to cover up because it's a kid's show and we shouldn't talk about certain things, but then they just do it in this way, but they just avoid the common words that are just a no-no, even though the act is still here. It's a very weird episode of going around censorship that they commonly do, but actually it's still an interesting story on top of it.
Raising spirits.
Now, I do prefer it when the Halloween or Christmas specials, they are clip shows, but then they actually do continue a standard episode story, which actually uses new footage. I do like it when they do blend them together, and Raising Spirits was not a bad attempt. Now, of course, it is still a clip show. They do showcase some of the old monsters, but it was one of the things that I found fun. Again, because it's a Halloween episode, the Rangers don't have to be fully in character. They can be a little bit more unique because they are playing and dressing up and they're trying to have a day off. On the villain side, they can be a little bit more creative on dealing the Rangers. The monster could be disguised as something that they wouldn't expect to be something wrong. We can exploit their weakness and vulnerability right now because they're trying to have fun, which I wish more monsters and villains would do more often. And it showcases, the characters being fun, because usually whenever I'm talking about Megaforce, I'm always complaining about, oh, the characters are just being stupid, they're being wasted, Troy's, story is not being used at all, Gia is ignoring Jake, we're going through that same process over and over again, so it's finally something different, something, a lighthearted, but still enjoyable.
Hypnotic Halloween.
Hypnotic Halloween was one of my favorite episodes of Beast Morphers, just like the previous one I talked about in Megaforce, where it lets the Rangers be a little bit more lighthearted and more fun. This episode goes 1000% in the ultimate direction of making the Rangers get brainwashed and turn into the characters that they're dressed up as. There are many episodes where monsters have brainwashed the Rangers or trapped them in dreams, so we get these weird, odd, unique episodes, and I thought it was very creative because it also showcases the actors' acting range, so we can see them all interact and argue and do weird things that we would never see any of them do, which is why I really enjoy the episode. It's still a new Beast Morphers episode, but at the same time, ultimately, the clip show idea is the easiest way to save money, but you can save money for a production in multiple ways, and this is one of them, by being a bottle episode. A bottle episode basically is, let's just use what we have existing, because we're watching them of how they acting weird, or how can they break the spell and get out of this problem. That's what we enjoy, and that's why I really like this one.
Zed's Monster Mash.
Now, another way Power Rangers has saved on money during the Halloween episodes is their ability to reuse monster suits. A lot of effort goes into making the monsters for each week's episode, and unfortunately, the monster gets thrown out. It gets blown up, it gets erased. You have this monster suit that can be used once or twice, depending if it's a two-parter, and then that's really it. While Halloween does give you the ability or the excuse of bringing back monsters from the dead. And on top of the reason why I really like this episode, it was showcasing something very smart of Zed. Why not trick the Rangers and, lead them away and separate them in order to get rid of them? Because again, one of the most powerful aspects of Power Rangers is the team working together. But if you can separate the Rangers, it weakens their powers. And what better way to separate Tommy, for example, to trick him into escorting these group of kids. And, under normal circumstances, this wouldn't work in any other way, but Halloween gave them that opening, which Zed exploited. So I really enjoyed this episode, not because of the old monsters coming back and all this weird Halloween stuff, but it was a really good plan that Zed came up with, and I was like, yes!
Trick or Treat.
Now, Trick or Treat, I like this episode, and I put it fairly high on my list, but not because of the obvious reason of Pumpkin Wrapper. Now, I don't hate Pumpkin Wrapper, but I never found the obsession of that people really liked with him when they released his figure in the Lightning Collection line, and he's unique because he's the rapping monster. But I didn't really care about the episode because of that. I actually found the B-plot of the Ranger story more interesting. I like the game show thing about what Kimberly, and it also involved Bulk and Skull, so having them do this whole game show and trying to win, and of course, Kimberly has to basically forfeit the win because she has to help the Rangers out. I always like seeing that conundrum of the Rangers trying to deal with their normal life situation when a Ranger situation comes in calling, and you have to see how are they going to deal with it. Kim was clearly about to win, and now she has to let it go and let Bulk and Skull win, which is more annoying because they'll gloat later on, but on top of it, they didn't deserve it. Kim did.
Old foes.
Now, unlike the other Halloween episodes that I've talked about so far and we'll talk about later, this one was a full standard episode, if you can call it a standard episode, where it was not a clip show, and it was actually designed in order to resurrect, like it says in its title, an old foe. This was the first a return of Lord Zed since Power Rangers in Space. So it's a really important moment, but that's not the reason why I like it. Yeah, Zed is important. I like when they bring back old characters. It actually factors into the main story where they have this Ragul that can bring back the dead. This is a very powerful monster ability to reanimate or restore monsters of the dead. I really like it when monsters group up together, and it brings so many different problems because each monster has so many different abilities that one monster is a problem. 6 versus 6, that's going to be a really difficult challenge, and there are many multi-parter episodes that showcase this ability that if the Rangers aren't careful, they can be taken advantage of by just 2 or 3 extra monsters teaming up. On top of that, Lord Zed comes back, and we're going to see that dynamic of Zed coming back, but then he has to listen to this monster, and we know Zed is not going to last that long. He is going to break free and then start his own plans of dealing with the Rangers of today.
Trick or trial.
Now, surprisingly, Power Rangers doesn't always acknowledge that monsters are a species of beings just like humans, but they don't usually like to showcase them, having either emotions or acting like people, because the main reason why that happens is because it's easier to have them as 2D characters, blank slate, so that when they're killed, kids don't have the potential of feeling sorry for them, so they usually don't want to showcase them like this. For this episode, I thought it was really clever of how they did the story, and it makes perfect sense of Possandra's personality, because think about it, even though they're all in the wrong, all the monsters have attempted to kill the Rangers and attempted property damage, murder, destruction of Earth, and all this conquering. But it would make sense that you could hire a lawyer to attempt to defend these actions. I mean, it's also a joke on what happens in real life. We've heard how many dumb lawyer stories. They sued them because they broke my shoes, they threw paint on my coat, things like that, which really don't warrant court cases, and they should just literally just be argued personally and ended there. So a lot of court cases end up being these stupid things. And on top of it, the Rangers have to defend themselves in very odd ways. And of course, they're dealing with a legal system that's on the bad side. So the good side has to work even harder in order to win by their rules. Surprisingly, in the season of Dino Supercharged, which overall the majority hated.
Carlos and the Count.
Carlos and the Count. There are very few Halloween episodes that Power Rangers really heavily delves into the mythicism of, Halloween. Vampires, zombies, demons, the undead, magic powers. They don't always deal with that. So when Carlos got turned into a vampire and the Rangers have to deal with that situation where he's basically evil and he has to be turned back to being good. On top of it, it was a Carlos focused episode, which doesn't really get to happen that often. And they're also delving into all the tropes of being a vampire. And then on top of it, you have this underlying conundrum. Well, we can't kill Carlos, so we have to figure out how to reverse him, but how do we deal with him? It was kind of a plan that was pretty smart for Diva Talks. And on top of it, this is a little tangent, but the episode felt more interesting because this, if I remember correctly, this was the one and only time where they actually didn't put in a lot of music in the episode. They kind of made it mute, so it felt more eerie and weird. And Power Rangers usually just loves flooding the show with music endlessly, and we don't get a chance to have like an action scene or a conversation without music at all to make it feel more dramatic. So it was something unique. And on top of it, I think this is the only time they had the alternate combinations of the Rescue Turbo Megazord combining with Artillatron. So there was a lot of firsts in this episode on top of a really interesting story, which is why I enjoyed it.
It came from Angel Grove.
Number one has to go to It Came From Angel Grove. Like the previous episode, taking advantage of the Halloween episode, this one did that as well, but went one step further by having one Adam, and also we get a look at, the school, which magically changed design because they actually filmed in a real school for those scenes. It kind of showcases Adam being exhausted because, again, being a ranger, going to school, doing all this junk, you're gonna collapse and fall asleep. But then on top of it, he goes into this weird dream-like situation, and all the characters are all these bizarre characters doing things here and there. He's trying to get out of the situation. It was a very unique episode, and the actors had fun. You could see they were having fun because, again, it brought back Rita, Zed in the proper way versus being just stupid nonsense that they were doing in Zeo. That was another thing. It was a breath of fresh air. Then rather than just following the Machine Empire, Rita and Zed just living in the Winnebago. I think that's why I don't have a problem for the most part with the holiday episodes, because it pushes the show out of status quo. And in most cases, when Power Rangers has to save money, they give us a filler episode that's just really dumb. But when it comes to Christmas or Halloween, it allows the writers to be like, you know what? We don't have to do all this nonsense. Let's just have them goof around and dress up in these weird costumes and give the monsters weird powers that suit this, this holiday. So I always hope to have a Halloween or a Christmas episode. And Super Sentai has been doing it for many years as well. They've come up with very bizarre episodes, especially when it comes around like Christmas. I can remember the Gokaiser episode where Gokai Silver had the Christmas key, which had the green and red ranger keys combined, so he had this very odd suit. Japan loves to also do these very odd episodes to just break up the monotony and have fun. So I hope in the future episodes of Power Rangers, whatever comes from this reboot, that they still keep these style of episodes in there. If you have a subject or a topic you'd like me to cover, leave a comment down below and I may use it in a future video.